And you know what else there's going to be interesting takes from Matt on when we get to it is going to be Kula Shaker, K,
Yeah.
an album, one of two albums this week that I had never, ever heard in my life.
Same.
So, yeah. Well, let's just plow into it, Josh. I'll give a little bit of bio as I give my reaction down the road. But initial thoughts on this one.
Yeah, this was really surprising. Based on, I didn't know anything about this band. They're an English rock band, and they wear their influences on their sleeve. I would say they are a rock band first and foremost. They're in that rock, British rock era of London and Britain, and they are. I would describe them as rock with psychedelic influences and Eastern spirituality, or like Indian music influences firmly as like a secondary part of their sound,
which apparently made them a very polarizing band in their time.
Yes, I could see why. They also, have this big kind of 70s rock sound to them at times. They also strike me as loving the Beatles and Hendrix and Led Zeppelin as well. All of those sounds are there. And I think I'm still wrestling. I guess the first thing I wrote was like, is this appropriation? Because they use Indian sounds and lyrics wouldn't be, I guess it'd be like, I think I saw like Sanskrit lyrics, or I don't know what like Indian dialect. I don't want to lump all of the different languages of India into one thing, but they use that on kind of in the way the Beatles did, I guess, on songs like Govinda and Tatva, where
they're like if the Beatles just did that portion of who the Beatles were and just stayed with it. Yep.
Yeah. And so I should say these are all like English white dudes. They're not Indian or from the surrounding areas. And I guess, I don't know. So I'm kind of mixed on this band. I really like some of the songs on this when they have like good hooks and
well, do you want to hear like I guess we almost have to give a little bit of their background to get like how this happens, right?
Okay,
so,
sure.
Kind of quickly doing it, in 1988, Crispian Mills, who by the way is the son of actress Haley Mills, which I find very interesting. Okay. Yeah. I had no idea, but was Parent Trap, right? Was that Haley Mills famously?
And then Trap more recently as a special appearance. That's funny.
Yes, and apparently his father was film director Roy Bolting. Do you recognize that name, Josh?
I do not, no.
Okay, yes. Well, he was Roy and John Bolting were identical twins who were English filmmakers known for satirical comedies in the 50s and 60s. So there you go. That's who that was. So anyway, Crispian Mills meets Alonza Bavan in college in London, and they form a band called the Objects of Desire. And the two of them are in it along with a gentleman named Richard Cave on drums, and Marcus French takes over for him shortly afterwards. So they're the two drummers. There's Lee Morris on rhythm guitar and Marcus McLean, who was at that point Haley Mills's boyfriend. So that means that his mom's boyfriend was in his band.
Oh, weird.
Right? That's what it's like. It says Marcus McLean, then Haley Mills's boyfriend was on lead vocals. So yeah, I guess his mom's boyfriend was the vocalist. So in 1991, Paul Winterhart joined the band on drums, and during this period, Crispian and Alonzo also ran a psychedelic nightclub in the back of an ice rink called the Mantra Shack, Josh. And consequently, the band would play there. The band itself broke up acrimoniously in March 1993, after which Mills went on a spiritual pilgrimage, backpacking around India, Josh. The trip had a profound effect on the guitarist, fostering it. This is all from Wikipedia, so it's a quick grab right here. The trip had a profound effect on the guitarist, fostering a deep interest in Indian culture and Hinduism. And upon returning to the UK, he formed a new band named the K's, with Bavan and Winterhart still in it, but his cousin Saul Dismont, who is apparently the son of a Bermudian politician, on vocals. The band debuted Their first live performance was at the 1993 Glastonbury. Wow. Talk
Wow.
about
Okay.
quite a show there. And Saul Dismont left the band, the vocalist, to be replaced by Jay Darlington, who had been a part of several mod revival bands.
Okay.
And then they decided to change their name in May 1995 to Kula Shaker in honor of one of the 12 Alvars, the saints of South India, the 9th century Indian Empire and holy man King Kula Shakara. And he was thought to be lucky or auspicious.
Okay.
So and that's why they chose it. There you go.
I love how the Brits always try and bring mod culture back. Like it's
Yes.
it's something they
It's
just
the
can't
eternal
let go.
struggle. Yes. Is there an American equivalent of that? Like something we just keep trying to bring back over and over again?
I don't know. It's almost like
Swing
Greasers
music or something?
Yeah. I don't. Yeah, maybe. Okay, so that explains kind of the Indian influence of the band. Even the album cover has kind of like a, I don't know, Sergeant Pepper meets India. Who's on the cover? Is that Shiva, Vishnu? I can't remember. The Indian pantheon.
Maybe
of
it's
gods.
King Kula Shakara.
Oh, maybe so.
I'll check. Yeah.
But I don't know. I found this I found this album pretty listenable. It's got this great rock sound to it. It's almost like Oasis at times as well, if you want another comparison. But they've got good, they're a good sounding band. This is a well produced album. I like guitar rock in general, obviously, but I do think the songs, outside of a few hits on this album, are kind of forgettable in some way. Surprisingly, like I found the songs where they put the Indian or Eastern sounding music in as kind of the core along with the guitar, the most effective. So songs like Govinda and Tattva, I really like. They have like great grooves to them, and it really hits on like kind of that overlap between psychedelic and rock and the Eastern spirituality. The opening track, Hey Dude, is also really good. It's got a really good hook. That's more like just traditional
That's the single,
type of rock.
I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's I guess that would be kind of the most Oasis sounding of a song, although not production wise. They don't sound the same as Oasis. And then I also liked Grateful When You're Dead, which the other part of that name is what Jerry Was There, and that's got this kind of great 70s rock throwback to it. So I was surprised by this album. I don't know how much of a lasting impact this album will have on me if I would go back to Kula Shaker, but I thought they were pretty talented overall, and I liked kind of that they were trying something new. I don't know how I feel about them. I mean, if something Eastern music, moves you and kind of you're impacted by it, is it appropriation if you start like using it? I don't know. It doesn't seem, what am I trying to say? Like it's not like a gimmick really. In a way, if you go to if you go to India and then like have some sort of like spiritual experience, I can see why you'd want to incorporate that. But yeah, I feel like I'm rambling. What did you think of this album?
Yeah, well, first I want to go into the artwork of the cover, Josh,
Yeah.
because I want to explain this because so the cover art, which was done by comic book artist Dave Gibbons.
Okay, Dave Gibbons is a famous, he
yes.
did Watchmen and a bunch of other stuff.
You're correct. I was going to say that if you didn't know, Just, but yes, he's who did this. Consists of various images related to the letter K, including, and let me clear my throat for this, John F. Kennedy, Lord Kitchener, Karl Marx, Gene Kelly, Ken Dodd, Katharine Hepburn. Ken Dodd is an English comedian for those of us
King
that
Kong,
are not British. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Danny Kaye, Kal-El, which is Superman.
Yep.
Boris Karloff, Krishna, that's who I think you recognized on there.
Got it.
King Kong, Martin Luther King Jr., two knights, a kettle, Kali, who is the major goddess in Hinduism, the other person you recognize there, the Kaiser, Nikita Khrushchev, Grace Kelly, Rudyard Kipling, and the number 11 symbolizing the letter K. So that is what's on there right now. I could not let this review go without describing that because that's, I don't know. Do we call that clever or do we call that, You know, it's like kind of like it resides in that lane right
Yeah,
there, right?
I'm with the latter. I feel like that's kind of stupid, actually.
Yeah, it does have a little bit of like cut and pasty
Yeah.
of it. Like it feels like it's two different album covers at the same time. Like they did like one with like an Indian theme, and then they just were like clip clip and put it on at the bottom. So it's surprising to me that like a very famous artist did that, because it doesn't seem put together. Now the album itself, I actually like this album quite a bit. It's certainly not going to be an album that rises like into one where I will list it as an album you definitely have to listen to. I put it in some ways like the Black Crowes, where it's like an album I like, but it's so clearly a piece of nostalgia that it's hard to process it like in its own time, and certainly not from the future where you're like, I'm covering an album from the 90s that's trying to do the late 60s, right? Like those are always hard for me, like from an influence standpoint, because they very much are like not reinventing the wheel. But there were a lot of the song, actually all the songs you mentioned I like, Josh. I actually liked 303 as well.
Okay.
A song on here. It was sort of like a I don't know, it was catchy in its own way. And that one sounded to me like a Oasis. You said an Oasis song. To me, that one definitely sounded like an Oasis song. I agree with you that the Eastern elements were the parts I liked more. They seemed to be very comfortable, and they complemented the guitar parts better. And which surprised me, because I'm not always a huge fan, right, of bringing in the Eastern influences. But they worked better. They were more cohesive. I thought the songs that didn't have them in it were a little bit more generic, would be how I'd describe it. And when I went and listened the second time, that especially stood out, that they just seemed more inspired when they were leaning into sort of the either the Eastern influences or the Grateful Dead influence, which is all the way, like all throughout this album. Because you mentioned bands they're indebted to, but you left out like the Grateful Dead and jam rock, which I feel is like all over this album as well. And the highlight of this album is definitely the guitar work. I thought that it was a strong guitar album. I also, the lead singer's voice works for me. It's the one thing that binds this to the Britpop era that it's in, because there's no light between how his voice sounds in a vacuum and what the Britpop bands sound like, but you don't necessarily process it immediately, because there's also all of this psychedelic, rock, and like what is it, raga? Wasn't that like the term the Beatles used and stuff? The raga sound along the way. There's also annoyingly 13 minutes and 4 seconds of silence in this. That it took me 6 minutes to realize that was the case before I fast forwarded, because I didn't want to miss anything. So that is never needed in an album. So, boo on that one right there. But
and the end of that is not anything worth listening to.
No, and it's basically becomes like mantras and so I would not recommend along the way. But I would say slight recommendation for this one. Listen to it as a pleasant, it doesn't overstay its welcome either. So it's which is, I'm more and more like realizing that's a huge thing for the 90s, because a lot of these albums do overstay their welcome. So you're going to get points for me if you don't overstay your welcome. So the pieces are all there, and it's a very pleasant listen. Like I said, I put it into that like Black Crowes or Jellyfish, right? Like type stuff where it's of another era in its time. But I also put it in that category of like the Wallflowers, where it's just perfectly acceptable cromulent rock that doesn't rise to like anything beyond pleasant listen, you know, and that's kind of where I stand on this one.
This was a Britpop band too that didn't really cross over to America, so I think
I remember hearing their name, but they did not have much of a presence here.
So if you've listened to the big four Britpop and you're like, what else was going on at the time, check this out. That might be kind of like in the orbit of other things, so you can expand your horizons a bit.